Imagine walking through a crowded marketplace in ancient Greece, only to find a half-naked man holding a lantern in broad daylight, peering into people's faces. When asked what he was doing, he replied, "I am searching for an honest man." That man was Diogenes, the most rebellious philosopher of the ancient world, who mocked kings, ridiculed the rich, and exposed society's hypocrisy with his sharp wit and shocking behaviour. But who was Diogenes? And why did he reject the norms of civilization so completely? This is the story of the man who challenged the world with nothing but his words and action. In the grand halls of history, where philosophers like Socrates and Plato are revered for their intellect, one man stands apart. Not for his wisdom alone, but for his outrageous defiance of social norms. Diogenes of Cynic, the father of Cynicism, lived like a beggar, slept in a large clay jar, and urinated in public just to prove a point. To him, human civilization was built on falsehoods, and the only way to live freely was to reject materialism and embrace shameless honesty. His life was a radical protest against greed, power, and pretense, making him one of the most fascinating and controversial thinkers of all time. Diogenes was born around 412 BCE in Cynope, a Greek city on the coast of the Black Sea. His father, Hyphaesius, was a banker, but a scandal involving the debasement of currency forced Diogenes into exile. Some say he willingly participated in the scheme, while others believe he was merely caught up in his father's downfall. Regardless, this event set the stage for his future rejection of wealth and societal conventions. After leaving Cynope, Diogenes travelled to Athens, the heart of philosophy. But instead of seeking comfort, he chose to live in poverty, believing that material possessions corrupted the soul. It was in Athens that he became a disciple of Antisthenes, a student of Socrates and the founder of Cynicism. Antisthenes' teachings emphasized self-sufficiency, virtue, and rejecting superficial desires. Diogenes, however, took these ideas to an extreme that even Antisthenes had never imagined. Diogenes adopted an extreme form of simplicity, living without a home, surviving on scraps, and carrying nothing but a wooden staff and a small bag. He discarded even his drinking cup after seeing a boy drink water with his hands, declaring that he had been carrying unnecessary baggage. He lived inside a large ceramic jar, or pythos, outside the temple of Cybele, rejecting the need for a conventional house. He often performed daily activities in public, eating, sleeping, and even relieving himself, just to challenge social norms. When confronted about his behaviour, he argued that if these acts were natural, there was no reason to hide them. To him, shame was a human invention, not a law of nature. Diogenes was notorious for mocking other philosophers, especially Plato, whom he saw as overly intellectual and detached from reality. When Plato defined humans as featherless bipeds, Diogenes plucked a chicken, brought it to Plato's academy, and declared, "Behold, I have brought you a man." This forced Plato to refine his definition to include "with broad, flat nails." He often disrupted Plato's lectures, dismissing his ideas as useless nonsense. Unlike Plato, who built elaborate theories about an ideal society, Diogenes believed the best way to live was to reject society altogether and embrace nature's simplicity. One of the most famous stories about Diogenes involves his encounter with Alexander the Great. Curious about the eccentric philosopher, the young conqueror approached Diogenes while he was sunbathing and offered to grant him any wish. Without missing a beat, Diogenes replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." This response stunned everyone. Alexander, the ruler of the known world, had never been dismissed so casually, but instead of taking offence, he admired Diogenes' boldness and later remarked, "If I were not Alexander, I would be Diogenes." Diogenes had no tolerance for hypocrisy and often exposed it in the most humiliating ways. He would walk through Athens in broad daylight holding a lantern, claiming to be looking for an honest man, implying that none existed. When he saw an elite man covering himself while urinating in public, Diogenes ridiculed him for being ashamed of a natural act. He would enter rich people's homes and beg for food, reminding them that their luxury was meaningless if they could not even share. He also openly criticised the institution of slavery, which was common in ancient Greece. Ironically, he himself was once captured by pirates and sold into slavery. But instead of despairing, he treated it as an opportunity. When asked what his skills were, he boldly replied, "I know how to govern men. Sell me to someone who needs a master." He was purchased by a wealthy man named Xeniades, who made him a tutor for his children. Even in bondage, Diogenes maintained his fierce independence. Diogenes lived to an old age, reportedly dying around 323 BCE, the same year as Alexander the Great. Some sources claim he died of an infected dog bite, while others say he simply held his breath until he passed away. Even in death, his wishes reflected his disdain for social conventions. He requested that his body be thrown outside the city walls so wild animals could consume it, reinforcing his belief that the body was insignificant. Despite his controversial life, Diogenes left behind a powerful legacy. His teachings influenced later philosophical movements, including Stoicism, which adopted his ideas of self-control and living in accordance with nature. His relentless pursuit of truth and fearless rejection of social norms have made him a symbol of intellectual rebellion. Diogenes was more than just a philosopher. He was a challenge to civilization itself. He exposed the absurdities of human customs, mocked power without fear, and lived with an unmatched level of freedom. While his methods were extreme, his message was clear. Happiness does not come from wealth, status, or power, but from living authentically and without pretense. Even today, his legacy inspires those who question authority and reject materialism. In a world obsessed with appearances, Diogenes reminds us that sometimes the wisest man is the one who owns nothing but his principles. So the next time you feel trapped by society's expectations, remember Diogenes, the man who needed nothing and feared no one. What do you think? Was he a genius or a madman? Let me know in the comments.